that way, and then you, I wanted to go to Europe. That was
Welcome, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming tonight. And this webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available on our YouTube channel later. And just some upcoming announcements on some programs. On our second Saturday in July, our speaker will be John Maeta, and he will be talking about the story of the natural heirloom. On Saturday, August 19th, from 10 to 12, we'll have a new program called the World War II Briefings. You'll find some more information about that on the table over there. And the next Allvets program will be August 23rd at 7 p.m. And for more information on any of these programs or registering, you can visit our website at yorkhistorycenter.org. And now Allvets would like to welcome Bob Myers, who will speak about his time in the Navy.
I'm Bob Meyer. I'm a third generation veteran. My grandfather was a World War I veteran, World War I Army veteran who served in France. My dad was a World War II Navy veteran who served in the Pacific. And I'm a Navy veteran who served in Vietnam. Also, on my mother's side, a little bit of history. My great-great-grandfather in the Confederate Army, he fought in the Stonewall Brigade. And he fought at Culp's Hill on the second day of the battle against. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So we have a history in our family of service. A little bit about my family. I live in Dover. I've been married to my wife Debbie for 53 years. I have two grown children. My son Jason and his fiance. Sarah and her son. Aiden, and my daughter Jennifer, and my son-in-law Paul. So that's my immediate family, and they've been a great inspiration, and they're my heart and soul. I retired from Voight Hydro with 33 years of service. The last 9 of those 34, I was on full-time leave of absence. I worked full-time for the Machinist Union as an organizer. When I retired from Voight and Machinist Union, I went to work for 6 more years at Metals USA, where I was a member of the Teamsters Union. So it's a little bit of background and history on my family and work experience. In April of 1966, I was still a senior in high school at Northeastern. And in April, I went to the Navy recruiting office. It was on the 2nd floor of the old post office on South George Street, and enlisted in the Navy. Several weeks later, they sent me to New Cumberland Army Depot, where I took my physical and a battery of tests. And in May, I was sworn into the Navy, graduated in June, and on September 28th of 1966, I left for Great Lakes, Illinois for the Naval Training Center. Myself and 2 or 3 other guys from the York area left for Great Lakes on a train. We rode the train all night and arrived there the next day. Great Lakes is halfway between Milwaukee and Chicago on Lake Michigan. One of the things that I remember, we get off the train and they bust us into the base. As soon as we get into the base, I heard someone on the outside holler, "You'll be sorry." And that didn't do a bit for my self-confidence and to relieve some of my anxieties. So, but it all worked out. I was put in company 584, and I officially became a seaman apprentice, which is a seaman recruit, which is pay grade E1. And our company commander was W.D. McGee. He was a first-class petty officer. He was a ship fitter, and a ship fitter is his job classification, and that's the same as like a pipe fitter or a plumber on the outside. So he was our company commander. One of our first order of business was to get a haircut. At a building, you went in one side, they cut your hair, and you went out the other. Well, when they came out the other side, we didn't recognize them. A lot of guys went in with long hair. When they came out, they all had the same hairstyle. They buzzed their heads. Luckily, I wore a crew cut, so I didn't have much to cut off for me. So Then the next door business was they issued us all our uniforms and our sea bags and all our personal hygiene equipment. Next door business was they taught us how to fold all these clothes, all the clothes and stow all our gear. And that was one of the big things. Because we get on board ship, you have limited space, so you got to know how to fold your clothes so you get everything into the limited amount of space you have, especially on a destroyer like I served. Boot camp is it was a lot of classroom instruction. This is a Blue Jackets manual. That was our textbook. Anything and everything you want to know about the Navy and seamanship, it's in here. And that was our handbook and what we studied in class. It covers everything. We had a lot of practical experience also, especially in firefighting. Fire is a dangerous thing on board ship. So it's essential that everybody knows firefighting procedures. One of the most interesting part is they instructed us on how to put on proper way to put on and take off a gas mask. So one day they had us put on our gas mask. They marched us into a building, closed all the doors, and threw in tear gas. So we were in a few minutes, and after a while, somebody comes over the loudspeaker. Everybody, take off your mask. So we had to take our masks off, and about 2 or 3 minutes later, they left us out. Everybody was coughing and choking and rubbing their eyes. So that was an experience I never forgot. We did a lot of marching. They didn't transport you anywhere. You marched everywhere you had to go. And we even had practice drills where we marched. And when I got out of the Navy, I never marched again. So I didn't miss that. It's not like the Army. In the Navy, we don't march. As the weeks went on, it got colder. Great Lakes is up north and it's pretty cold. So the weather constantly got colder through November and December. I'm due to graduate in about the second week in December. What you have to do, you have the week before you graduate, you have to stand honor guard duty for the group that's graduating ahead of you. And what that entails is you have to stand at attention along the aisle or the path that goes into the drill hall where they hold the graduation. Until we got dismissed, we looked like snowmen. We were standing out there. It was freezing cold and it was snowing, and we all looked like snowmen until we got dismissed. But then the following week, we got to stay in the drill hall when we graduated, so we weren't out in the cold. My parents came up for the graduation, and prior to graduation, we got our orders to our next duty station, and I was assigned to the USS Corey, BD-817. It's a destroyer out of Norfolk. Little background on the Corey. It's a destroyer. It's 390 feet long, 41 feet wide, and it has a draft of 14 feet. And it displaces a tonnage of about 33,000 tons. So it's not a large ship compared to most in the Navy. And it's not the smoothest riding ship. But it was going to be home for me for the next 4 years. So I had 2 weeks leave after I didn't have to report to the court for 2 weeks after I graduated. So I got to come home and spend Christmas, my first Christmas in the Navy. I got to spend at home. When I got home, my dad, like I said, was a Navy veteran. He had a set of tailor-made dress blues that he wore in World War II. He gave them to me. They fit perfect, and I wore them the whole way through, halfway through my enlistment until we got to Hong Kong on our Westpac cruise, and I had a set made for myself. Plus, I had a suit made, a tailor-made suit. A lot of good tailors in Hong Kong. So 3 days after Christmas, I boarded a bus and went to Norfolk, drug my sea bag up the pier, and the Corey was 3 ships out, so I had to cross 2 other ships to get to the Corey. When I got there, since I didn't have a rating or a job classification, I was put in first division. That's the deck division with the bosun mates. Bosun mate is one of the oldest rates in the Navy. Goes back to the days of sailing ships. They did all the rigging and maintained the main deck. So I was put in there. I became a decade. What we did, we scraped paint. We maintained, both mates to the first division, the deck division maintained everything from the water line to the second level. So we scraped and chipped and painted a lot. So it wasn't a great thing to be doing, but it taught me a lot of seamanship because both mates, we handle all the lines when we pull in and out of port. When we refuel at sea underway, we handle all the refueling trunks. The lines come across, we man all those stations. When we're at sea, we stand bridge watches. So I got to do helm duty where I got to steer the ship. So not many people in the world can say that they steered a ship. So I did that. In port, we stood quarterdeck watches. Quarterdeck is where you come aboard the ship. There's usually an officer to watch, a petty officer to watch, and a messenger. The messenger is a gopher. You know, they send him for coffee or everything. So since I was just a seaman apprentice, I had to stand messenger to watch. But it taught me a lot about seamanship. And when I came up for my my seaman, which is E3, I passed the test because, like I say, being on the deck force, you learn a lot about seamanship, and that's what the seaman's test is all about. So I didn't have any trouble passing that, so I was promoted to E3 seaman. After about 6 months, the first 6 months, we did a lot of cruising around, and I did get sick. And one instance in particular, we were in the Atlantic and we hit a terrible storm. And it's so hard to describe how it was. It was so rough that we were down when you go down into the trough, when you looked up, there was water around you 40 to 50 foot high. All you could see was water. You just can't imagine, you know, and it's hard to explain. But we got through that, and it was pretty frightening. But at that point, I was so sick I didn't care if the ship rolled over and it sank. It put me out of my misery. There's nothing worse than seasickness. Some of my assignments when I was in First Division, my general quarters, my first general quarters assignment was in Mount 52. That's the after gun mount. We had 2 mounts on board, Mount 51 and 52. And we can look at some of this when afterwards. It was a twin 5-inch 38 mount. And I was a hot caseman. When the gun fires, well, first of all, I'll tell you, it's the gun shoots semi-fixed ammunition. That means there's 2 pieces. The powder canister stands at about maybe 2.5 to 3 feet high, and it's about 4 to 5 inches on diameter, weighs 20 pounds, and the projectors weigh 55 pounds. So when the gun fires, breech block drops and it shoots that hot case out. Well, my job was a hot caseman. They gave me an asbestos mitt, and I had to catch those cases when it came out of the gun. And I mean, they come out of there pretty fast. And then you have to drop them down the slot in the back onto the main deck so they don't pile up inside the gun mount. So that was my first general quarter station. And on board, we had what we called Dash. It's an anti-submarine helicopter, drone anti-submarine helicopter. It was remotely operated, and we had a flight deck and a hangar. And what it did is it could fly out and drop a torpedo. So they always had a damage control team there, and I was on the damage control team. We had to man fire hoses in case the Dash would crash on landing or taking off. And there was a record of a lot of them doing that throughout the fleet, although they never crashed on our ship. So I had to sit there and man a hose with one of those big foil suits that you see at the airports that the damage control people wear. So I had to sit there with that on while they flew the Dash helicopter. But that only lasted for about a year and a half. While I was on board, then they discontinued the Dash program because they had too many problems with it, and they took the helicopter and everything right off of the ship, so we didn't have to worry about that anymore. After about 6 months, I got we were at sea on different maneuvers during those 6 months. The first 6 months, We went to the Caribbean and we got to stop in St. Thomas, which is a good Liberty port. It's got nice white sand beaches and the water, you can see the whole way to the bottom. It's really a nice Liberty port. So we were in there a few days. We also made a stop on one of our, after we were out on one of our exercises, we pulled into New York City. First time in a big city, it was quite an experience. A shipmate and I decided we were going to go to Brooklyn. Well, we jumped on the subway and we weren't sure what stop to get off. So we got off at one stop and we went up, and it was like being in a foreign country. Nobody spoke English. We didn't know where we were. So we thought, well, we better get back on the subway. So we did, and we finally made our way to Brooklyn. And when we got off, there was a little corner neighborhood bar there. So we strolled in, and there was a bunch of old guys in there, a lot of veterans. And man, it was like a holiday when we got in there. We couldn't buy a drink all night long. They just treated us like kings. And we left there, we were a little bit tipsy, but we did manage to get back to the ship. So that was my experience in New York City. After about 6 months, the weapons officer notified me he wanted to see me in a stateroom. So I thought, oh, now what's going on? So I went in and he said, I've been reviewing your records. He said, would you be interested in becoming an ASROC gunner's mate? I said, sure. ASROC, what it is, it's a rocket propelled torpedo or depth charge, and it comes out of a launcher. And I have pictures of those up here, you can see. And by the way, those launchers were made right here in York at the Naval Ordnance Plant, down where the old Naval Harley-Davidson plant was. It's no longer there, but that used to be the Naval Ordnance Plant. And those launchers were made right here in York. To become an ASROC gunner's mate, I had to acquire top secret clearance because we had nuclear capabilities, and a lot of stuff that we did was classified. So I didn't have a lot of duties till my clearance came through. Once I obtained my top secret clearance, then I was cleared to do just about anything in the ASROC program. One day we had a civilian tech rep come in, and he would help us with technical problems with everything. And he saw my nameplate said Myers. He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "York County." He said, "That's a good York County name. Where are you from?" I said, "York County." And here he had worked at Naval Ordnance Plant. So and he actually knew one of the girls that I graduated with. So it was made me feel a little bit more comfortable being away from home, running into somebody from York County. So the whole time I was on the ASROC program, we had a second class gunner's mate that kind of took an interest in the guys that just came aboard. I was just a seaman, and he had an apartment off base, and when I didn't have duty, I'd go over to his apartment. His wife would cook dinner for us, and he'd school me the rest of the night. He really helped me. Problem is, I was a gunner's mate. Guns is what I had to study for. It had nothing to do with ASROC, so I was studying for things that I had no practical experience on. But he schooled me, and I did my courses. You have to do two courses before you can apply to take the test for third class gunner's mate, which would be E4. So I completed my military requirements, correspondence course, and the correspondence course for third class gunner's mate. Once I had those completed and passed, then I could apply to take the test. I took the test and passed, so I was upgraded from E3 to E4, became a third class gunner's mate. In the year, in 1967, we did a lot of cruising, to participate in a lot of exercises. We were at sea again. We were in the Caribbean again. One of the experiences we had to escort a electronic surveillance ship off of Cuba. In other words, a spy ship. They were cruising up and down, and we were there to escort to make sure that they were safe. It was pretty interesting. Got to see Havana. You could see the skyline of Havana during the day, and at night you could see the bright lights from Havana. So that was pretty cool. when we left there, we were headed back to Florida, and on the way back halfway between Florida and Cuba, there were 2 Cuban refugees trying to escape Cuba and head to the US. They had 4 or 5 inner tubes slashed together with planks on the top, and that's what they were out there rowing towards the US in. So we picked them up and turned them over to the Coast Guard, and after that, I'm not sure what happened to them. But that was an interesting experience. Another time when we exercised, we worked out at Port Canaveral in Florida. That's right next to the Kennedy Space Center. So we got to tour the Space Center, which was interesting. While we were there, they unloaded a lot of electronic equipment and brought on some civilian technicians. We pulled out and operated with the Polaris submarine that was conducting ballistic missile tests. So I got to witness a ballistic missile launch from a submarine, which is really interesting. It comes up in a big bubble. When it gets to the surface, it ignites and it's gone. So something not many people get to witness. So that was interesting, an experience there. We had a little bit of liberty in the Caribbean. We were in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and back to St. Thomas for a second time. Then in June of '67, we went into the shipyards in Fort Smith, Virginia. It's right across from Norfolk in the Bay. We spent 8 to 9 months there. We're complete overhaul. They overhauled the engines and the boilers. We updated a lot of our equipment. They stripped the whole ship down and everything was repainted. We had an interesting experience. We had an ensign. His name was Mr. Schufer. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His family owned a big woolen mill in South Carolina, and he was kind of green. So one day it was raining, and we were sitting in the hangar deck, and he come in and he said, "Why aren't you guys out there painting?" I said, "Well, it's raining. What difference does that make?" We had to explain to him why you couldn't paint in the rain. So he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but we did convince him that you can't paint in the rain. After we get out of the shipyard, we headed to Guantanamo Bay. Once you leave the shipyards, you have to go on a shakedown cruise. So we operated out of Guantanamo Bay. What a shakedown cruise is, you have to go out and test all your equipment, making sure everything that was done in the shipyard is working properly and correct. It's also a chance for the crew to shake off the rust and get acquainted. So we had a lot of gunnery exercises, damage control exercises, general quarters exercises. So it's actually a training period to get the crew back into shape. So we spent several weeks down there. It's not the most pleasant place in the world. You got a gate all around and you can look right across. The Cubans had their observation points, can look right into the base, and the Marines are standing there with their guns looking out at the Cubans. So there's not a whole lot to do. One time, if you go over, a lot of the sailors go over and they get drunk and get unruly. So what the shore patrol rule birds them into what they call a cattle car, and that's what it looks like. It's a tractor trailer with a trailer on the back. It looks like a cattle car, and they herd all the sailors in there and take them back to the ship. So one day there were about 4 or 5 of us that were headed from the ship over to the Navy Exchange, and we were walking along talking, and off in the distance there was a captain, and he was walking his little poodle dog. So we were a good distance away from him, so we passed him, and after a while we heard, "Hey, get back here." So he called us back. He said, "You didn't salute me." He said, "Now you stand at attention." He made us stand at attention, and we must have to salute him 10 times. And then he said, "Your captain will hear about this." And we never heard any more about it. So, and one of the reasons why I got out of the Navy, there's all those kind of people that discourage you from staying in. So he was one of the big reasons why I didn't stay in the Navy. One of the reasons why I didn't stay in the Navy. We got back off of that, and I guess that was in May of '68. We got out of the shipyards and went to Gitmo, and from then on to the time that we got orders to go to Westpac or a Vietnam assignment. I was studying for my upgrade to E5, which would be gunner mate second class. So I took my courses, passed it, and took the test, and I passed the test. Now they promoted increments. I was promoted in the last increment, so I wasn't upgraded to second class till we got to Vietnam in January of 2000 or 1969. I had to wait a little while to get promoted. And like I say, in early 68 or middle of 68, we got orders that we knew we were going to be transferred to the West Pac, to the Western, West Pacific Fleet, or Vietnam service. And right before that, the gunnery officer called me in, the weapons officer called me in again, and he said, look, we're going to be offloading all the Allvets. There's no anti-submarine warfare in Vietnam, so we're going to be transferring you to the gun gang. So I was transferred over to second division, which is a gun gang. Second division comprised gunners mates and the fire control technicians. That was the second division. So I was transferred over there, and that's where I remained till I was discharged. So on September 7th, 1968, we left Norfolk, headed for the Pacific, along with the Robert L. Wilson. That was DD 847. Douglas H. Fox, DD 799, the Waller, USS Waller, DD 466, and the Waldron, DD 699. We all headed down the East Coast, headed for the Panama Canal. We were off North and South Carolina, and the Douglas H. Fox had a fire and an explosion in the boiler room. Three sailors were killed, 5 were injured, severely burned. So we transported all the victims, the dead and the injured, into Charleston, South Carolina, where they were taken to the Naval Hospital there. And then we at flank speed, we headed back down and rendezvous with the other 3 ships right off of Florida. And then we transferred down to the Panama Canal. We transited the Panama Canal at night, and then proceeded up the West Coast to San Diego Naval Base, where we received our orders for our operations in Vietnam. While we were in San Diego, a bunch of us rented a car. We drove to Anaheim and went to Disneyland. While we were at Disneyland, we ran into movie star Denver Pyle. And if you don't know who Denver Pyle is, if you ever watched The Dukes of Hazzard, he was Uncle Jesse. So we got our pictures taken with him, and one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. So that was quite a neat experience. Some of the guys went to Tijuana. I stayed away from Tijuana. It's not the most pleasant place in the world to be. It's kind of dangerous. So I didn't go to Tijuana. I stayed in San Diego. So we left San Diego and we headed for Pearl Harbor. We got to Pearl Harbor, where we offloaded all our ASROCs, our rocket launch torpedoes and depth charges. We had some good liberty there. Several of us rented a car and we drove around the island and toured. I tried my hand at surfing. That didn't work out too well. I spent more time in the water than I did on the surfboard. And then we got to tour the Polynesian Cultural Center there, which was pretty neat. So it was pretty good liberty. A little expensive, but it was good liberty in Pearl. After we left Pearl Harbor, we left for Midway Island, where we refueled. When we left Midway, we headed for Guam. In Guam, our old XO, our executive officer, was transferred, and we brought on our new XO. We were glad to get rid of the old XO, but after a while, we would have been glad to have him back, because the executive officer that we got was a real trip. So wasn't the best. So we once we left Guam, we headed for Subic Bay in the Philippines, and halfway between Guam and Subic Bay, we hit Typhoon Faye. So we were in 25 foot seas for 12 hours. It wasn't a pleasant experience, but finally we arrived in Subic Bay, where we took on supplies. and ammunition, and we had some Liberty. The Liberty town there is right outside the base. It's called Longappo City. And what an experience that was. It's one long strip about a mile long, and it's one bar and nightclub after the other. It's it's a real poppin' place. Every night, Saturday night there, it's like a giant party. When you leave the base, you have to cross a bridge to get to Longappo City, and the bridge crosses what looks like an open sore pit. And the little Filipino kids are down there swimming around in this, and they want the sailors to throw coins. So it's a very poor town. If it wasn't for the Navy, it'd probably be a ghost town because the Navy keeps the town going with all the money that the sailors spend. So we left there and we headed for our assignment in Vietnam. And when we got there, we took on 2 Vietnamese ensigns from the South Vietnamese Navy. They were with us for the duration of our time in Vietnam. It was kind of a learning experience for them. We had, well, I don't know, apparently they didn't trust that we had orders not to show any kind of technical manuals or give them too much information. So they were just kind of there. Our first assignment, we were escorted into the Mekong Delta by 2 swift boats. We anchored in the Delta in brown water for 3 days, and we conducted harassment and interdiction fire at night. That's to harass the enemy or keep them on their toes. And during the day, we got called to fire targets from the ground, the troops on the ground. So we spent 3 days there doing that. After that, we were out on the gun line. 1 year on the gun line, we were supporting troops on the ground. We worked with a spotter plane. It was like a small Piper Cub, and I think it was either Air Force or Army. The spotter was, and he'd spot targets and call in the coordinates, and then we'd fire on those targets. Life on the gun line wasn't real pleasant. My GQ assignment was in the gun mount. They split the crew into port and starboard GQ squads. So while one squad was on for 4 hours, the other squad was off, and then 4 hours later you were back on again. So you were 4 hours on and 4 hours off in the gun mount. And that went for 24/7 while we were on the gun line. And in the gun mount, it wasn't a pleasant experience. It was hot. It's a cramped space. Like I say, you have 2 guns in there. Gun crew consisted of a pointer and trainer. The pointer moved the barrels up and down. The trainer moved the mount side to side. And then you had a hot casement, a projectorman and a powderman and a gun captain on each gun. And then the mount captain who was in charge of the whole mount. So when you're in there, it's a little crowded, and when we weren't firing, waiting for orders to fire, you try to find a place that was comfortable. It's almost impossible to get comfortable, no place to lay or to sit really. So it was kind of uncomfortable, and we went sometimes 2-3 days. We had very little or no sleep at all while we were on the gun line. And when we were off, they expected you to perform all your other duties. So it got to be a little taxing at times. Some of the interesting things that happened when we were on the gun line, like I say, we supported the ground troops and worked, like say, with the spotter plane. After I made second class, my GQ station first was a gun captain. What you do, you stood at the back, and when the gun fires, the spade comes back, that rams the charge. We had to drop the spade back so it could charge the next round, and you counted the rounds that were shot, so you could tell when to cease fire. When we get an order to fire so many rounds, then you kept the gun captain kept charge of that, kept count of the rounds that were fired. Once I made second class, I was promoted to mount captain, so I was in charge of Mount 52. One night we were on night patrol, and it was kind of a lull that we weren't doing any firing, and it got hot in the gun mount. So mount captain is up at the back of the mount on a platform, and there's a hatch up above where you can open up and you can stick your head out. So it got a little hot, so I was up there, I had my head out, and I looked out across the water, and it looked like a burning oil slick. It was just flames all over the surface of the water. So as we got closer and closer, and we got close enough that I could see it was about 30 or 40 Vietnamese fishing boats, and they all had torches on them. But from a distance, it looked like a burning oil slick. So that was interesting. Those fishermen are out there. We used to be up and down the coast, and they'd be fishing between us and the coast, and we'd be firing right over their heads. They didn't even flinch. The only thing that made them mad was when we ran through their fishing nets. They didn't appreciate that too much. We tried to avoid it, but sometimes you just couldn't. So another time we got told to stand by for a call to fire, and then we all of a sudden we got disregard those orders. They saw a bunch of guys dancing around a campfire. It turned out to be a bunch of drunken Australians, so they almost got blown up. So luckily they ordered us to cease fire before we got to blow them apart. Another time we had you have what you call a misfire hang fire procedure. A lot of times, not often, but every now and then the power charge won't go off. So you don't know if that power charge is cooking off or not, but you have to pull it out and discard it over the side. So one night we had one, so we pulled the case out, and I wanted to get it over the side as quick as possible before, you just never know if things going to explode inside the gun mount. So we did get it over to the side, and the next day our one of the officers said, "Did you happen to get the lot number off of that powder case?" I said, "That lot number was the last thing on my mind when that thing was getting ready to explode in my face. The only thing I thought about was getting it over the side." So he didn't say any more about that, about the lot number off of that powder case. When we weren't on the gun line, they had us up at Yankee Station. That was up in the Tonkin Gulf, where we were sailing around with the carriers while they were launching airstrikes. It was pretty boring, just cruising back and forth. The only little bit of excitement we got was when they were launching and recovering planes. We had to follow after the carrier in case any of the planes had to ditch, couldn't make it back to the carrier. We were there to try to rescue the pilot. So, but most of the time it was pretty boring up there. We participated in 3 campaigns over there. The first one was in 3 Corps down at the mouth of the Delta. And our job was to prevent Viet Cong sampans and boats from entering the Delta to resupply their troops. So that was pretty interesting. We got to usually chase after them, and the swift boats would pick them up. And we did blow one out of the water that I know of, but most of the time we just chased them, and they took off, and the swift boats went after them. The second one was Operation Bold Mariner. It was the largest amphibious landing since the Korean War, and it was on the Bataan Peninsula. We provided gunfire support for the Marines that were landing. They landed to clear out a Viet Cong stronghold there. We operated with the New Jersey, and that was quite an experience. The first time I saw the New Jersey, it was a foggy morning. We were cruising along, and all of a sudden the fog cleared, and there was the biggest ship I've ever seen in my life. It's really a sight. So, and believe me, the Viet Cong were scared to death of that thing. The 16-inch guns, they have a range of about 24 miles, 20 to 24 miles, and the projectiles weigh almost a ton. It would be like shooting a Volkswagen from York to Harrisburg. So that gives you some idea of the power of those guns. And believe me, the Viet Cong, they respected it. They were scared of that. Our 5-inch 38s had a range of about 9 miles, and our projectors weighed 55 pounds, but they packed quite a wallop. Our third operation was Operation Sea Dragon. We were sent off the coast of North Vietnam, close to Haiphong Harbor. We operated with the cruiser USS Springfield. Our job was to be a decoy. We were in closer to the shore to draw fire from the shore batteries. And once they fired, then the Springfield could get a fix on those, and they fire on with their 8-inch guns. So we were kind of a decoy. Luckily, we never got hit, and we did fire back at those We were only there a short time and orders came down directly from the White House that we were supposed to suspend that operation and we got out of there. So apparently at the time there was something political going on, but they got us out of there in a hurry. So we never did find out what was behind that. We hit a lot of Liberty ports over there. We were in Sasebo, Japan. Sasebo has a giant military exchange there, Navy exchange. So the whole ship was loaded with electronic equipment, tape recorders, turntables. I bought a turntable, 2 guns, and a lot of jewelry for my mother. So we couldn't send any of it home because when we come back to the States, we had to fill out customs form for all that. So all that electronic equipment and everything had to be stowed on board ship. Some of the other ports we hit, we were in Kaohsiung, Taiwan for a while. We were in, like I said, we were in Hong Kong. That was a good Liberty port. Like I said, there's good tailors there. I got my dress blues made there and a custom made suit. Then we also got the side of they have a group called Mary Sue Side Painters. And for a fee, they'll come out and they'll paint the whole side of your ship. So what we did, we had brass nose cones that came off the projectors to protect the end of them, the fuses on the end of them. So we collected all those brass nose cones, and that's what we used to pay Mary Sue Side Cleaners. That we paid them in brass nose cones. So that was pretty interesting. So that saved the boatsmates a lot of work. They didn't have to crawl over the side and paint the sides. Then we were in when we left to come home, we stopped in Yokosuka, Japan. There was a naval base there, so we spent some time there, and then stopped in Okinawa before we headed back to Pearl Harbor. When we get into Pearl Harbor, I don't know if you remember the movie Tora, Tora, Tora. It was about the attack on Pearl Harbor. Well, they were filming that movie while we were there, so it was interesting. There were Japanese Zeros and American fighters flying all over Pearl Harbor, so it was a pretty neat experience to see that. So after we left Pearl, we headed from the Pacific coast. We went down the coast towards the Panama Canal, and we stopped in Mazatlan, Mexico, some Liberty, and then transit to the Panama Canal again, up through to Norfolk. We got back to Norfolk and glad to be back. You don't appreciate the U.S. till you go overseas and see how the people over there live, and you really appreciate what you have in this country. A lot of those people are just can't believe how they live and how little they value their life. You know, like I say, there's Vietnamese fishermen. You know, they just it was like nothing. You know, firing over their heads. So the value of life is less over there in those countries. When I got back, I got to come home. Even the whole time I was in Norfolk, when we were in port, I got to come back to York a good bit. You get a 72-hour pass. You can always find somebody that was coming north that had a car. You can always bum a ride. If not, there's always the Greyhound buses. We get off like Friday afternoon, and we didn't have to be back till Monday morning at muster. So there were quite a few weekends where I was home. And when I got back, I came home and that's when I met my wife Debbie, and we dated. And like I say, I got to come home a good bit on weekends, spend time with her and my family. Between the time we got back and the early part of 1970, we just out of normal operations and normal exercises. Then we got orders to go to the med on a med cruise. So again, the weapons officer called me in, and he said the lead gunner's mate, which was our first class gunner's mate, which is E6, is being transferred. I'm going to have to assume the duties of an E6 or an E7. So I took over as lead gunner's mate, and I was in charge of all the gun gangs. So that was quite an experience. I was kind of thrown in there to that. That put me in charge of the 2 gun mounts, the armory, all the magazines, the small arms, and all the pyrotechnics. So I was in charge of all that, ordering all the ammunition, making sure everything is maintained. There's quite a bit of responsibility for a young kid that's only 20 years old, 21 years old. So, and then I was placed on the Master at Arms Force. That's the ship's police force. So the whole time in the med cruise until I got discharged, I stood Master at Arms duty. So it was a rotating. I think there were like 4 or 5 of us on the Master at Arms squad, and we rotated. My job was we ran the chow line. They lined up to the passageway. The mess hall was on the 2nd deck, so many people. There's only so many people to be down there and be in the mess line at one time. So I ran the mess line to make sure that that there was the right amount of people in the mess line down in where they got served, and I kept count of how many meals were served. Also, when we report, I had to muster to restrict the men. A lot of guys get restricted. They go to captain's mast or this or that, and then they get restricted to the ship. So we had to make sure that they didn't skip out and try to get off the ship. So we had every so often we had to muster them to make sure that they were still on board. We handled any problems that like drunken sailors that come back and were creating a disturbance. We had to deal with all that. So it wasn't bad duty. It was a lot better than standing after steering watches, because a lot of the second class had to stand at where you could. Actually, they switched control to the after steering, which is in the rear of the ship. So you were back there at steering. It was kind of boring. You're in it back there all by yourself in a little compartment for 4 hours. So I didn't have to worry about standing that duty. So in February of 1970, Debbie and I got married. 2 weeks later, I left for the med, and I was gone for 7 months. So it wasn't like being married. We were apart for 7 months. So we headed for the med, and our first stop was in Barcelona, Spain. So we had some liberty there, and then we went through the Straits of Gibraltar. I got to see the Rock of Gibraltar. We did some operations in the med. The Russians were all over the Mediterranean, the Russian Navy. So we operated a lot over there and kept an eye on the Russians, and they kept an eye on us. So we were always around them. We used to have every now and then we'd have a barbecue. They took the repair crew took a 55-gallon drum, cut it in half, and made a charcoal grill out of it. So we'd have barbecues every now and then on like on the weekends over there when we were just cruising around. So when we weren't using it, we put it on the fantail and covered it up. Well, the Russians saw that covered thing on the back of the fantail of the ship, and they were looking with their binoculars, thought we were trying to hide some kind of secret weapon or something. So it was crazy. And one time we were cruising along, and a Russian ship come up alongside, and they flashed a message, said, "Captain to captain, where you go?" So they wanted to know where we were headed, but we didn't even respond. We just took off and left them. So they're always trying to harass you over there, see how close they can get to your ship and everything. So it was a game of cat and mouse with the Russians. So after we operated, we went to one of our first liberty ports was in Helena, Malta. Malta's an interesting country. So there's a lot of old ruins and things there. So we got to tour that. I was a duty driver. I had my government license, so I had duty driver duty, but I didn't have it in Malta. But our duty driver went over, and unfortunately, he parked the car and went into a bar and got drunk, and the Maltese police picked him up, and I had to go over and retrieve the car. It was the first time I drove a right-hand car. I had to shift with my left hand, so that was quite an experience on those windy roads in Malta. So then we were out on operations again, and we pulled into Naples, Italy. And what was cool is I had a friend from York who was stationed there on permanent shore patrol. He had his own apartment, he had a car. So it was great liberty. I got to tour all around Naples, and we just ran around and had fun in his car. We weren't allowed to have civvies because we were enlisted. So, but since he was on shore patrol and I go off the ship and I kept civilian clothes at his apartment, so I ran around over there in civilian clothes. I didn't have to worry about getting caught, 'cause like I say, he was shore patrol, so I didn't have to worry about getting in trouble. The only thing I had to worry about was when maybe one of the officers seeing me out on the beach in civilian clothes, but I never got caught. So we left there and we went to Suda Bay and while we were out, we developed a vibration in the shafts and the screws. So we had to pull back into Naples and we were in the shipyards there for several weeks. So there again, I had some good liberty with my friend from York. So we spent quite a bit of time there in Naples. I got to know Naples quite well. From Naples, we were out and we hit a lot of interesting ports over there. We were in Kusadasi, Turkey. There we got to familiar with the Bible city of Ephesus, so we got to tour the ruins of Ephesus. That was really interesting. We were in Matros, Greece. It was just a little fishing village. I think the most exciting thing happened was guys sitting in the old general store playing checkers, so it wasn't a good liberty port. We also went to Trieste, Italy. We were in Trieste, Italy, so we hit a lot of good ports and saw a lot of things over there. I traveled three-quarters of the way around the world and got to see a lot of things that I would ordinarily have had a chance to see. On the way back, we stopped at Valencia, Spain, and then we were in Palma, Mallorca, and then we headed back to Norfolk. Got into Norfolk on September 19th, and my wife and my parents, my sister were there to pick me up, and 3 days later I was discharged from the Navy. So as soon as we returned from the Med, I was discharged and I headed back to York, and that's my Navy experience. Besides having the pleasure to serve my country, I also made a lifelong friend, Paul Garris. He was on the ship with me and he's from Lebanon. His family and my family have been friends for the last 50 years. So that was one of the best things that came out of my Navy experience was with his friendship. So that was my experience in the Navy. If there's any questions, you can come up here and look at all my things. I have a book from my naval training from the Great Lakes Naval Training Center. I have we get a cruise book for every cruise that we're on, reports everything that we did over there. I have one for my Vietnam cruise, one for my Med cruise. I have my Blue Jackets manual and several pictures. So you're welcome to check out anything. If there's any questions, glad to answer. Yes.
When your weapons were firing, were you ever issued any kind of ear protection?
No, that's another thing. After we came back from Vietnam, they stationed me up on the bridge with the weapons officer. So you're right out in the open. When they fire the guns, the only ear protection you have was this. You know, so I do have hearing loss. I've had hearing loss since I got out of the Navy, and I do get disability from the VA for that. But to give you some idea about the power of those guns, we were firing one time. We were out on an exercise and we fired. There was a water main on the forecastle in front of Mount 51. When we fired the gun, it broke that water main, and water came down the barrels. I thought we were sinking. You know, so there's quite a bit of concussion, you know, from those rounds. And you see on TV, they'll show these in these movies, like on a battleship, there'll be people out on the deck when they're firing with 16-inch guns. That doesn't happen. It would bust your eardrums and it could cause you to pass out, you know, because the concussion is so great. Yes.
Did you, when you were basically groundwater Navy, did you ever get off your destroyer to the ground in Vietnam?
No, like I say, when we were in the Delta, we were so close to the shore, I probably could have spit on the shore, but I never set foot on ground in Vietnam. So our main duty, you know, and we all had our job to do over there, you know, there were people that were, stationed in country that probably never even saw any action, you know, maybe been stationed somewhere on a pretty cushy base. I know a guy that was stationed over there, told me they had an Olympic-sized swimming pool in his base. So, the only swimming pool we had was the ocean, and they did call swim call over there, while we were off the coast. It was kind of a law, so they left us have swim call, but I didn't get in the water because I saw too many of those sea snakes that are deadly poison. So I said, I'm staying on board. Not doing that. And we did have swim call and other exercises from time to time. Out in the middle of the ocean, they call swim call. Everybody jumps overboard. I was always the gunner's mate that was up there that had the M1 looking out for sharks. So that was my job. Yes.
Are you considered Blue Water Navy?
Yes, we were considered Blue Water Navy, but our ship was on before the Pact Act, where they granted everybody, you know, Blue Water Navy Agent Orange status. Our ship was on the list where we were eligible for Agent Orange dispensation for any disabilities because our operation, we were actually oversprayed while we were in the Delta. So we did come in contact with Agent Orange, and several. I know my buddy in Lebanon, he has systemic heart, so he gets disability through Agent Orange for that, and I get type 2 diabetes disability through Agent Orange. So
So they say the Navy has it rough.
well, yeah, and I felt guilty because before we left for Vietnam, they put air conditioning on the ship, so these the building compartments were air conditioned. But like I said, when we were on the gun line, we didn't get a chance to enjoy that air conditioning. We were in the heat. Yes.
You mentioned the support you give to veteran organizations after you got out.
I'm having trouble.
You failed to mention what you're doing afterwards now.
What am I doing now?
Nothing.
Nothing. Oh, yeah, I'm a member of chapter 1032 of the VBA, and every month I give a veterans report, Veterans Affairs report. So and every month you get that report, so you can send it to New York with your newsletter. So
I really appreciate that.
What did you after you got out of the service?
that's what I say. I had 34 years at Voight Hydro. I was a welder at Voight Hydro. I was also a union president there for 6 years, and then the union offered me a job full-time, so I was a full-time organizer with the machinist union, and they had me all over the country organizing. So
I knew you from somewhere. I was over at one of the meetings at 10:32.
pardon?
I was a guest there from the VBA in Harrisburg, and I wanted to know.
Oh, you were there when I gave you the reports?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I think I remember you at the meeting,
yeah.
but I don't know, I enjoy doing that, and I think the members enjoy listening to that report. So it's one of my pet projects. I like doing that. It's a little bit of work, but I enjoy doing it. Any other questions or concerns? Yes.
Your loss of hearing, did you get benefits for that?
They claim I got my hearing tested, and if I don't have my hearing aids in, believe me, I can't hear anything. My wife says I can't hear anything with it. But I had my hearing tested. They said I have 60% hearing. I didn't qualify for hearing loss, but I get 10% for tinnitus ringing in my ears, which is constant. So I do get something. So I get 10% for tinnitus and 10% for type 2 diabetes. So I'm at 20%. Anything else?
Like two.
Like I say, you're not to look at anything. I have some pictures here from when we were in Vietnam. That was my rating. That's what a second class gunner's mate badge looks like. Gunner's mate is it's like your job classification. We call it a rating. So that goes underneath we call that a crow. That's our crow. And if you're in the Navy, it's a crow. So that's what a second class looks like. A third class has a third stripe down. A chief petty officer has a third stripe plus an arc above it. And then there's 3 stages of of chief petty officer. It's chief petty officer, senior chief, and then master chief, which is E9. So E5 is as high as I could get. I had my courses for first class for E6. I never filled them out because I knew I was getting out. So I had to extend for at least 6 months to a year to make E6, and I wasn't going to do that.
Silly question, if you're in the middle of wherever and it's your discharge date, do you have to wait till you get back to port before you get discharged?
We were in the Mediterranean, and my buddy in Lebanon was one of them. They were due to be discharged before we returned to Norfolk. So what they did, they transferred them to the carrier. The carrier flew them to an air base somewhere, I don't know if it's in Germany or where, and then they got a flight back to the States. So if you were discharged over there, they made sure you got back.
Couldn't afford to have that shipment back just for one guy. That'd be great.
I thought they leave you on the boat until your discharge date. We're gonna extend you because you like it so.
That's a breach of contract.
Yeah.
Although I did have a 2-year commitment in inactive reserve for 2 years extra discharge, so it's a 6-year obligation.
Yeah.
So, that's another thing, you were supposed to report to the nearest naval reserve station when you got out. I talked to a friend that went, he was an E5, he said he got there with some E3 that gave him a bunch of crap, so he told him to shove it and he left, so I never even went. So I never heard anything, so they didn't really force you to go, they encouraged you to go, they wanted to try to keep you in the reserves, try to sign you up for the full-time reserve, but I never reported, so I had my fill of them.
You told the story about that one XO or CO that told you to paint while it was raining.
Yeah,
Did you ever have any other conflicts with the commanding officers that told you something?
no, I had a good record, I never had any trouble. Another thing, we had an incident came on board and he was really dense. They used to mess with him and the officer sent him over one time, we were in Guantanamo Bay, and they sent him over to pay the ship's late bill. So he ran all over the base trying to pay the ship's late bill. So there were quite a few officers in there that weren't, like I say, the sharpest tools in the shed. But no, I never had any conflicts. There were officers that I didn't like that didn't treat you very well, but you had to treat them with respect. You know, it's you had to bite the bullet and keep your mouth shut. So
What was it like when you got out of the service and you started? Did you start working at Boyd right away?
no, I collected unemployment for about a month, and then I finally found a job. I worked at Consolidated Freightway on the dock. My father-in-law and some of my wife's relatives worked there. I was on the extra board. When you had to wait around by the phone, they called you when they needed you. So that was before the cell phones and pagers. So you sit around all day long, and about time you go to bed, they call you to come to work. And then you never knew how many hours or anything you were going to get. So I did that, I guess, for like 3 months, and then got a job at Bull McLaughlin, which is now United Defense. I worked there, and that's where I got my training as a welder. I worked there a year and a half, and I saw a layoff coming, because they work when the contracts run out, then they lay you off, and then call you back and lay you off. So I wanted steady work, so I knew Alice Chalmers at the time was hiring, so I went to Alice Chalmers and I got in there as a 3rd-class welder and worked my way up to 1st-class welder. And then Boyd bought Alice Chalmers, and that's where I retired from.
Did you ever have any experiences of just not being in the service anymore, hypervigilance, any of that kind of stuff? I mean, where you got real,
No, I
because of being on guard on the ships and stuff,
Yeah.
that would be.
I'll tell you, I went to one of our ship reunions, and there was one of the guys there, he claimed to be a veteran service officer, and he said, oh, you can get disability for PTSD. He said, all you gotta do is act like you're crazy. I said, I don't have PTSD, I wasn't under any stress. And he found out about the deal with the Douglas H. Fox and bringing those, he said, well, you witnessed all those dead bodies and those injured people. I said, yeah, but I don't have PTSD. And I said, I'm not applying for something that I'm not entitled to. I said, you know, it's not fair. to those people that truly need it, that are suffering from PTSD. No, I have no ill effects for my time in all other than my loss of hearing.
When you know that it would be wrong, that's integrity.
Yeah, it's not fair, you know, I don't, like I say, I don't want anything I'm coming to. I know there's guys that wear medals that they didn't earn. I don't wear it, I don't want a medal that I didn't earn. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. I want something that I earned that means something to me, so. The only medals I earned are the three: Vietnam Service Medal, the Republic of Vietnam Medal, and National Defense.
Once you qualify for combat action,
I probably am, but I don't consider myself a combat veteran, so I don't wear it. That's the way I feel. We got combat pay over there
yeah,
when we were on the gun line.
$65 a month and all of that.
Yeah. But I don't consider myself a combat vet, so I won't wear
You did your job.
I
You
did
can't
my
pick out- You can't pick where you're gonna be.
it. No. And a lot of people say, well, you know, they had to deal with the fairground where the state representatives gave out the pins. I had a guy tell me, if you weren't in country, you don't deserve one of those pins. I said, hey, look, anybody that served at that time could have been in Vietnam.
Yep.
I said, and they picked up the slack all around the world for the guys that were in Vietnam. So I said, I don't regret those people. Anybody that served in that era could have been sent to Vietnam at any time. You didn't have a choice.
What about all the people that went to Canada?
Yeah.
What's our guy gonna say to them? Oh, it's okay, they can go to Canada.
You know, the sad thing is that, you know, it was a political war. 58,000 people got killed for what, you know?
Nothing.
I think, at first, you know, when I came back, I hated the peace movement. I thought, you know, it's terrible. But as I got older and I studied history and looked at it, and I thought, we should have never been there.
I agree.
There's a lot of places we should not be in, but
And it's interesting, if you study the history of Vietnam, when the French got involved after World War II, Ho Chi Minh took him as one of our allies. He's looked at the US, but we backed the French,
Yeah.
back in.
Yep.
Which turned him to the communists.
Yep. That was a big mistake.
Yes, it was. So you're welcome to come up and look, I have pictures of the ASRock, the gun mount, dash. And the next thing.
In case you want to give me a call.
Okay, well, he gave me one of his too, so.
Richard.
Yeah.
You can,